In one of the first videos we did on this channel, I talked about how this bed right here, what I call the well bed, was tall enough that the torpedo grass couldn't invade into it. Well, that was obviously not true. As the sticks and leaves I put in the bottom of it decayed and the soil settled down, it lowered to a height where the grass had no problem punching through, as you can see. So what I want to do in this video is talk a little bit about how you can keep these rhizomatous grasses out of your gardens, out of the areas where you don't want them. We're going to take everything out of this bed and dig all the grass out of it. I'll show you what it looks like and fix it for next spring. And then I'm going to show you how you can prevent this from happening with another bed we built in the meantime. I didn't really have time to work on this over the last few months, but I didn't want the grass to get worse inside it. So what I did was I dug out the grass all the way around it, around the perimeter, so that way it wouldn't just keep getting more in it, you know. I think anytime you're dealing with these rhizomatous grasses, you pretty much have to dig like a trench, or you know how like old castles had a moat to protect it around it. You don't have to fill it with water, but you do kind of need something to protect it, because the way these spread obviously is underground. You know, rhizome, I think rhizome comes from a Greek word meaning root, but in modern biology or botany it means a stem, a root-like stem. So when we look at the rhizome, we say, well, that's the root. No, that's actually a stem that's growing underground. It's not a root technically. But anyway, they grow underground, and this torpedo grass is the worst. This is one of the worst weeds in the world from some of the websites I looked at anyway. And it's just really, really bad. And the only way to really keep it out is to maintain some kind of border like this around what you're growing. So we're eventually gonna mulch this at the end. But I kept it bare for now because when we dig out this dirt, I might need to put some of the dirt here, and I don't want to get the dirt mixed up with the mulch because then it'd be hard to separate it when we put it back in. One of the reasons I didn't do this yet is because we had flowers planted in here this year. I did try to plant a few tomatoes in, but they didn't do anything. But all this, it looks like most of this is sage, scarlet sage, which is really good. I mean, it self-seeds and everything, but we also had some sunflowers and stuff in here in the summer. But anyway, the reason I didn't do this yet is because the butterflies were using all this sage. It's been so hot down here. It hasn't even frozen yet. This is January 3rd, I think it is, and it hasn't even frozen yet. But the butterflies have been using this. They're not using it right now, but that was the reason I left it in here, to give them something to eat, I guess. So my plan of attack is to remove all the plants and put them in the compost, then remove all the mulch that's on top of the soil, set it to the side, then separately we'll start removing the soil and setting it in a different pile and remove the grass at the same time. When we get to the bottom, we'll look and see what it looks like. If it looks like there's still a lot of grass alive down there, I'll take the pickaxe or the miner's pick and dig it out. And then once we've got all that out, we'll put the dirt back in, and then we'll put the mulch back on top of it, and then we'll mulch this outside perimeter. It sounds like a lot, but I'll cut it up so it doesn't, you don't have to sit here through the whole thing. The main thing is, especially with this torpedo grass, but I assume most of these other warm season grasses are similar, is that you can't leave a tiny piece of rhizome in there because it'll grow into a whole new plant. That's why it's so hard to deal with this type of grass through tilling or like a sod cutter or something like that, because if you leave any in the ground, it's gonna come back. And this stuff grows, I think I read it can grow like 1 to 1.5 centimeters a day or something crazy. I mean, it grows very, very fast in the warm seasons. But anyway, let's get started by removing these plants. I guess we should take out these stakes first. This rebar, I had some tomatoes and stuff in here on this, staked up. I found these long pieces of rebar are really good because you can hammer in the ground pretty far. We got real sandy soil here, so shallow stakes don't really work too great. But another good thing about the rebar is it doesn't disturb the soil that much, since the diameter of it is not that great. You know, I kind of hate to remove any plant that's growing well, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. They'll all go in the compost anyway. Look at that. Crazy roots on these guys. But they've been growing for nearly a year, maybe about 10 months. We've got a hard freeze coming in a day or two, so I'm not sure they'd survive anyway through that. You know, I think a big part of being a good gardener is not getting too emotionally attached to anything. But maybe that's true of life in general, I don't know, but sometimes we have to make hard decisions, and we need to be able to make them logically in the best interest of the entire landscape, not just, you know, what's our favorite plant. Might cut this up a bit later. I'm actually kind of worried it might start growing in the compost, but we'll see. This stuff is pretty hardy. All right, I guess next thing to do is get this mulch out of here. This is mostly pine straw, and some pecan leaves fell on it in the fall. We're gonna reuse it. I think I'm gonna put it in some of these recycling bins. It'll make it easier to put back in here. Throw it in these. It'll make it easier to dump it back in here when we're ready. Look at all that grass. You can really see it when you get the other plants out of here. Oh, there's a little green anole. I must have disturbed his slumber. Sorry, little buddy. Now you might be tempted to just pull up the grass and say, okay, I'm done, you know? But remember what we said, the part underground is really the stem. So this part. Now see, this actually made some progress, right? I don't know if you can see that from there, but this long part is the stem or rhizome, underground stem. These little things that come up are just the part we see. In that sense, it's kind of like a lot of mushrooms. You know, the part we see above ground is just the fruit in a sense. And most of the body of it is below ground. Well, that's what these are. So if you don't get rid of this, and I mean all of it, like if I took this, let's see if I can even break it. If I take this and break it in half, if I leave this part in there, this part is just gonna grow into a whole new plant and then have the same problem. So we have to get every little single piece of this out that we can. And the only really way to do that is, that I know of, is manually. I don't know any machine that's gonna help you do that. So I'm gonna go get the shovel and the pickaxe, and we're gonna start digging through this and moving the soil out of the bed and removing the grass in the process, hopefully all of it or as much of it as we can. So I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. I got some of these pieces of hard plastic. I think like a mattress or something was shipped in these. Someone was throwing them away, so I grabbed them. But we're gonna put these down and put the soil on them so it'll make it easier to get back in here when we're done. If you put it in the grass, it's really hard to pick out of the grass. So I'm just gonna throw these down here. I've also got some pieces of cardboard here for the same purpose. Just make life a little easier for ourselves. All right. Now, not really sure the best way to go about this. I guess I could take this off to access it easier. Right. I gotta show you this grass. Look at how this grass grew in the side like this. It comes up in that crack between the soil and the boards. It always does this in all the beds. If you leave it, if you let it come right up to the edge, it'll grow right up like this. So that's what we got to get rid of. But I think the easiest way, actually I don't know the easiest way, let's find out. I'm wondering if the pitchfork might work for this. If not, we'll have to use the shovel. The issue with the shovel is it chops the grass up even more. Let's just see. Yeah, I think we're gonna have to though, because I don't think that's really gonna come out like that. We can use this. Break up these roots. There might be some tree roots in here as well. Oh, it's getting kind of windy out here. Yeah, that feels like a tree root. But you see that grass? See how it grows? Let's see. Need to put all this grass in a bucket or something, because we want to get rid of it. This is going to take a while, so in the interest of time, I'm going to do it real quick and speed it up so you don't have to sit through it, and then we'll talk about it on the other side. All right, I think we're looking pretty good now. I wanted to mention a couple things that I noticed while I was digging it out. The first thing is almost all of the grass was concentrated on the edges, and specifically on the east and north edge had the most, which tells me two things. Number one, digging the trench or whatever you want to call it around it, removing the grass around the area definitely helps, because that's where it's coming in from, you know, through those rhizomes. I mean, that's not really a surprise, but that definitely confirms it. This torpedo grass specifically, it doesn't really grow from seed here in North America, at least not in a significant enough amount to matter. It's almost entirely spreading through the rhizomes. So if you can prevent the rhizomes from coming in, then you can prevent it from being in your bed, you know what I mean? And the second thing is the fact that it was largely concentrated on the southern edge and some on the eastern edge makes sense, because that's where the sun is, you know, especially in the winter. It's shining on these edges. This is kind of shaded on this edge. You can see, especially when these pecan trees have leaves on them, there's hardly any sunlight getting right up on this edge in the middle of the day. So this type of grass really needs sun to grow. It prefers full sun, even down here where the full sun's like 115 degrees. It really likes that. And it doesn't grow well in the shade. Like if you look under some of these big oak trees around here, there's not much grass growing under them. So anyway, that's two things I noticed while I was digging it out. I probably could have just left the middle of it because there was very little grass in it, but I don't know. I got a lot of tree roots out too. This is everything I dug out of it. I'm sure they'll grow back in there, but just while I'm in there, there was some rocks, some pieces of concrete too from the house that Katrina destroyed. So I went ahead and got all that out too. Now I'm gonna take a break, and I got to straighten up. You can see it's kind of lopsided. Some of these boards are falling out. They're not really nailed in here. They're just sitting in these grooves and these bricks. And the bricks over time have shifted and kind of fallen, so the boards don't stay in them right. So I need to fix that, but I'm gonna take a break first and we'll come back and do that. All right, it's the next day. It got too dark last night, so I had to wait till today. But I went ahead and repaired the corners and put the dirt back in. I want to show you just a couple things. First of all, for the corners, I realized the reason that it always shifts west is because this is kind of on a slight slope. It's probably hard to tell on the camera. So what I did was I just took some 2x, which dimensional lumber fits perfectly into these grooves. I suppose that's by design. But I ripped some 2x and put in here as stakes to hold up these corners. So they're really strong now. If I need to, I can put some on this end too, but I don't think that's gonna be necessary because like I said, it slopes this way. And I put the dirt back in. The only thing to say about putting the dirt back in is while I'm doing it, I'm checking to make sure there's no grass still in the dirt that I took out, which there was, and I had to remove it. Like I said, you wanna get every little piece of that rhizome out that you can't see. I see a piece right here as I'm talking. You gotta get all this stuff out because it's storing energy in these rhizomes in the winter. Even though it's not growing, it's got a ton of energy in these things. So you gotta get rid of them or they'll come back. Now I wanna hurry up and mulch it before the sun bakes it too much. So let's do that. Okay, now the last thing to do is to mulch this pathway, and that'll keep the grass from growing back into it. So for that, I've got some wood chips. Let's go get some of them. They were cutting on some trees around here recently and asked them if I could have the wood chips, and they said yes. It's pine and some live oak. We might talk about it later on in another video. But let's get this done because I've got something else I still want to show you. that was a lot of work. So now the question becomes, how do we avoid having to do all that work in the first place? Let me show you. So this is a bed we dug out maybe a couple weeks ago. One of my neighbor's oak trees had got struck by lightning and died, and these are some of its major limbs. To avoid the problem of the grass growing back up through whatever we put in here, we went ahead and dug it all out. I dug big chunks of it out, and Kiyomi and Sosuke removed the grass from it, and then we just put the dirt back in. It's a lot of work, to be honest, but I think it's worth it because it's less work than what we just did in the end, having to move all the soil out and get all the grass out of it and put it back in. This is easier compared to that, you know. So when I'm making beds now, I'm always doing this. I'm removing all the grass. I'm not just throwing something on top of it and hoping that it'll kill the torpedo grass, because I'm telling you, this torpedo grass, this isn't like a normal grass. There's a reason why they call it one of the world's worst invasives. And the reason it's called torpedo grass is because the ends of the rhizomes are extremely sharp and pointed like a torpedo. Or I guess you can imagine a torpedo flying under the ground, stabbing through stuff. I mean, this stuff can punch through asphalt, plastic. It'll find its way through concrete eventually if there's a crack. It's really, really hard to contain it. So rather than trying to contain it, I think the strategy is just to completely get rid of it. Now I still need to dig a border around this because it will eventually creep in. Although this area is pretty shaded overall, so the grass doesn't grow super fast here anyway. But I still want to dig around it just like we did over there and put wood chips or whatever around it. I was using chopped leaves, or you could just use regular leaves instead of wood chips if you don't have wood chips. It doesn't really matter what you put down. But the point is to remove the grass first and then put the mulch on top of it. I think that's really the way to go with this stuff. You really want to kind of pick an edge, whether it's your fence line or your property line or the edge of your garden, and slowly remove the grass as you move out. Don't build a whole bunch of islands out in the middle of the yard like we did in the beginning back there. I think I mentioned it on another video. If you build a bunch of islands in the middle of the yard, that's just a lot of edge for the grass to creep in, right? Or you have to dig a ton of borders around it. It's more perimeter. Whereas, like I built this right up on the edge of the asphalt. Well, the grass isn't growing in the asphalt, so that's kind of already an edge of protection right there. And then I just have to dig the other three sides out. If you kind of think like that and try to work your way from edges inward, or outward, depending on how you look at it, I think that's the key to getting rid of this stuff. Same thing here. Remember in one of the past videos I said I was gonna finish putting these stones in? Well, I finally got around to it, but it's the same idea. I've got borders. We put this in a while back. I've got a border with no grass. Obviously there's no grass in this concrete. And then I'm just expanding that no grass area. I'm not going out in the middle of the yard and putting something down. If I was to continue this, I would just keep going this way. You know, just make this bigger and bigger, like a balloon. I really think that's the key with this stuff if you don't want to use herbicide, which I don't particularly want to. As for the well bed here, like I mentioned earlier, we grew mostly flowers in it this year, and that seemed to work really well. We attracted a ton of pollinators with them, and they look cool and all that. Plus we've expanded the garden out there in the southwest corner. I'm gonna show it in an upcoming video, but we expanded the garden for row crops, so now we have a lot more room to grow vegetables and stuff like that. So we're gonna make this exclusively flowers and see how it goes. I actually ordered, I think it's called an insectary mix or something like that from Southern Seed Exchange. It's basically just a pack of random plants, self-seeding plants that have, you know, flowers that attract pollinators. So we're gonna try that in the spring. But either way, I've got a bunch of those scarlet sage seeds, and those things are self-seeding like crazy. I've got a bunch of other flower seeds in there too I could use, but we're gonna try that, and hopefully you can continue to attract a bunch of pollinators. And now that the grass isn't growing in it, it'll be a lot easier to manage. I really can't emphasize the importance of keeping this grass out of your beds, out of your garden, because once it gets in there, you're gonna have to do what we just did in this video, and I promise you, you don't wanna do that. You don't wanna have to be out here digging it again when you already dug it the first time. So just to recap, my advice is dig a border around it. You might even wanna do that first. You know, even if you gotta leave it bare or put cardboard or something on it for a while, just do that first. That'll keep it from continuing to grow in. And then do everything you can to keep it out of the actual beds itself. Well, I can't think of anything else to say, so I guess that's the end of the video. But thanks for watching, subscribe, like, and all that stuff, and we'll see you in the next one.